often enough is that the people in Florida go hard for their own. They go hard for their own. And there are so many people here from South Florida, especially Belgrade, Florida. They call them muck stuffers, baby. Who are here tonight. So make some noise if you are from the South, if you're from Florida. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming. And thank you so much for bearing with us through all of, these delays. I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to start actually from the beginning. So if you have your books with you, turn to the page if you will. Um, what do they call it? Revelations. Turn to Revelations. No, we're going to start at the introduction at the very beginning. I recall quite vividly the first time I walked across FAMU's campus. I was 9 years old, so I'm certain there are things that went over my head, but the feeling in the air of community, of acceptance, has forever stayed with me. For a boy born and raised in a migrant community, what I witnessed that day expanded my definition of Blackness. There, before the biology building, stood a semicircle of Black men in white lab coats, debating their points with such quick and passionate language that I could not keep up. At the base of an oak tree sat a Black woman with a legal pad perched against her arm, the wind tousling her box braids as she studied its yellow pages in deep concentration. Groups of teenagers, nearly indistinguishable from the college students, were clustered throughout the yard with trumpets, clarinets, and snare drums, their basketball shorts and white t-shirts dirtied from band camp. And they were all Black people. Everywhere I looked, my eyes found Black people. My sister took me to her upper level psychology course. It was my first time inside a college classroom, and I was enamored by everything. The desks were so long, the chairs swiveled all the way around. Her professor walked in, a Black man with half-moon spectacles, tossed his spiral notebook on the podium, and launched into a conversation with his students. I expected a lecture. This was an actual conversation. How could a man who held all the knowledge of his discipline be genuinely interested in what his students thought of the reading? It floored me. When one of his questions stumped his students, he put the question to me. To me. I cannot for the life of me remember the question, and I can't recall my answer, but I do remember how brightly he smiled afterward. I knew then I had to attend college. By the time I was old enough to apply, I had turned my attention to the Ivies. If Harvard did not accept me, then I'd settle for Princeton. If not Princeton, then God forbid I'd have to make do with Yale. I'd been educated in predominantly Black schools from pre-K to high. I wanted a different experience for college. Then the unexpected happened. During my sophomore year of high school, my mother passed away. Suddenly, everything I thought I knew about myself felt faulty and unreliable. My town was no longer comforting, it was hunting. I had to leave. College seemed the best option, so I graduated a year early. Before I began gathering application materials, my AP English teacher pulled me aside. Why is it always an AP English teacher? She must have sensed the confusion clouding my judgment because she told me something I have never forgotten. Go where you're wanted, not tolerated. Why was she telling me this now? I wondered. She knew of my Ivy League aspirations. Was this her way of suggesting I did not possess the intellect needed to compete at what I thought was the highest level? Was she trying to recruit me to Fisk, her alma mater? Questions raced, but in the end, I couldn't muster the emotional bandwidth to entertain them. She was the smartest person I knew. I had never not followed her guidance. My people had absolutely no money. Scholarships were my best option. I applied to as many as I could to the detriment of my college applications. With time ticking, I applied to only two schools, Morehouse and Howard. The lopsided focus paid off. I got word that I had received the Gates Millennium Scholarship, which would provide full funding for country. All I had to do was get admitted. Then I heard word from Morehouse and Howard. I had been admitted into both. At the time, one of my closest friends was a student at Morehouse and made quite the persuasive pitch. In Atlanta, the guys fall from the sky like manna. I'm gay, so there you have it. I share the full extent of my story, not because it's unique, but because it mirrors so many of the stories you'll encounter here in Historically Black. While these profiles feature celebrated Black educators, scholars, artists, scientists, and athletes, what binds them are the obstacles they had to overcome just to feed their passions. Because of these obstacles, many of the people you'll read about never graduated from college. Financial constraints prevented them from obtaining the degrees they'd spent years pursuing. Others had to work multiple jobs while enrolled to cover tuition. Reaching one's full potential has always been difficult for Black Americans. For centuries, educating Black people was illegal in this country. Concert halls and theater programs had long been the exclusive domain of white people. Collegiate sporting events were segregated for the better part of this country's history. Yet we found a way, often by establishing our own paths for success at historically Black colleges and universities. HBCUs have been both our springboards and our anchors, propelling us into this country's cultural center while grounding us in our history. Historically Black explores what it meant for some of America's most influential citizens to attend these schools. Their stories are organized into 5 distinct sections. Each section corresponds with the years they attended college and the major cultural movements that impacted their studies. Determining who to include was a difficult process, and I assume we'll probably talk about that process. There were so many lives, and there are so many lives intertwined with the legacy of HBCUs that didn't make it into the book. The hope is that this collection not only reflects the range of Black American life, but also the breadth of each HBCU's impact on our nation's history. And for any prospective student out there, I say, make the leap, because at HBCUs, you're wanted. Thank you.
Thank you, Alonzo, for that beautiful reading, for kicking off the event. I realize I did not introduce myself. My name is Ada. I had the pleasure of being Alonzo's editor on this book. So, Alonzo, do you want to tell the audience how this project came about?
Oh, I certainly do. So I was living in Nashville, Tennessee for a year, only a year, because I can't do Nashville for more than a year. If you're from Nashville, sorry. But I was living there for a year. And while I was there, a few months in, I don't even know how long.
Yeah, it was really quick because I had just, Alonzo and I, do you mind if I jump in? So we met at grad school. So Alonzo is a graduate of the Iowa Writers Workshop, which is the best program for writing in the world.
This is Ada. She's also a graduate.
So while we were in grad school, actually, I baited you into telling this story because I really wanted to tell this part of the story, which was that I realized like the college experience for Alonzo meant something different than like it does for a lot of other people, myself included. So Alonzo was just like always, since I met him, I think probably the first thing I knew about you was that you went to Morehouse. So he's a proud Morehouse man, and I could just see that it was, you know, going to Morehouse meant something more than just, you know, 4 years. It is a part of him. And so when I started my new job, so the reason why he went to Nashville was because our graduate program ended. So we were figuring out what we were going to do. He went to Nashville to teach, and I went back to New York to get back into the publishing industry. And this was the first book idea that I pitched to my colleagues. And this book, I know you like to say, it was like, oh, it was like your idea, and I know that's what you wanted to say, but it's only my idea because it's my idea to think of ideas for books because it's my job. But the passion that Alonzo has for his alma mater was really the idea. So it really all came from Alonzo. If I hadn't met Alonzo, this book wouldn't be here. So it's all you.
Yeah, I definitely echo much of that. What I like to say exactly is that this is Ada's book. I just wrote it, really. But when Ada contacted me with the idea of writing a book about HBCUs, I was hesitant at first because I am a fiction writer, really by trade. And so writing nonfiction is kind of like out of my purview. But it hit me. Maybe it was because I was in Nashville, Tennessee, and I didn't have anything else to do. But she hit me up, and literally the next day, I contacted Ada. I hit her back up with just all of the breakdown for the book. Okay, these are the there should be sections. These are the sections. These are the people who should be in the section.
Alonzo is a Virgo.
If you don't know, yeah. So I was very particular about how the layout should look, and I just had so many ideas, and it was something that wouldn't leave me easily. And so I had to just succumb.
Well, thank you for succumbing. And 2 years later, we have this beautiful book. And I actually do you want to tell the audience what read out loud what the chapters are and why you chose to structure the book in this way?
Oh, sure. Let's see. So I'm just going to look at the
table of contents.
Table of contents. This. Yes. So, if you're a Black history nerd like I am a Black history nerd. So much of this would probably ring true for you. But we started with the newly emancipated because although there are a lot of people who graduated and attended HBCUs during slavery, a lot of them really came of age after emancipation occurred. And so we start with the newly emancipated section, and then we move to the new Negroes, which is one of my favorite sections of periods of history, African American history, because you have Zora Neale Hurston there, who went to Howard and who was featured in the book. You have Langston Hughes there, who went to Lincoln and who was featured in the book. And you have just a lot of really magnificent thinkers during this point in time, and a lot of the periods also fall in such a way that many people who don't really kind of lump together are lumped together. So you will find that in the New Negro section, you also have Thurgood Marshall, which a lot of people don't think about. Yes, right? A lot of people don't think about. And then you have the agitators, which comes a little later. This is like around the 60s, 40s, 50s, 60s. We're talking Leontine Price, Martin Luther King, Toni Morrison, the hip hop generation. So we're talking Erykah Badu, and a lot of people don't know that she went to HBCU. We're talking Taraji P. Henson, right? We're talking Ta-Nehisi Coates. And then we have the millennials, which means Chadwick Boseman, our Black Panther, is included in that section. Yes, J.R. Smith is included in that section. Megan Thee Stallion is included in that section, right? So we broke those sections up into about 20, 30-year periods that will encompass much of African American history. And each of those sections, there is an opener for each of those sections that kind of provides some context as to what these major icons would have experienced as students, their lives going into college at that time, and in order to kind of provide some context and maybe some parallels.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about coming together with these people and dividing them into these sections. So you had the difficult task of researching the biographies of these people and researching specifically what going to college meant for them, what it looked like at that time, then you had the backdrop of history, what was going on in the country at that time, that of course can be told through the story of higher education. So yeah, we had a first draft.
You want to tell me about my draft? Go ahead.
Okay, so the tea is that we had a first draft that was very long,
Yes.
very bloated. And I remember, did I call you while I was at my residency, or we talked one time when I was like, this is a little long, and I think we need to find, it was just so much information, and I was like, I think we need to find the story for each person, like what's each person's story. So I was just curious, and I think a lot of people in the audience would be curious, like what was the research process like, and then how did you, because you did a lot of research, and how did you synthesize all of that research into a narrative, into a story?
Yeah, the research process was pretty lengthy and rigorous. But essentially, I read all of the biographies that these people wrote, and many of all of the autobiographies they wrote, if they wrote autobiographies, and all of the biographies, if there are autobiographies that exist on these individuals, and if there are no biographies or autobiographies, and I had to do a lot of research on like the articles that have been written, because some of these people are really recent, like again, Megan Thee Stallion. There is no biography or autobiography out about her, and so there was a lot of just articles that I had to pull up in order to do that. But my goal was to, with a lot of these compilation projects, what you'll find is that there's just like a general history of the person, a general biography of the person. And I did not want that to be the case with this. I wanted individuals to kind of like read it and really experience what this individual lived during college, like the experiences they had during college and what that meant in 1845, right? Or what that meant in 2011 for that individual. And so it was pretty, like I said, rigorous and tedious trying to find that specific information for each of these individuals. But in doing so, there was so many fun facts that I stumbled upon, and I wanted to include all of them in the book.
He literally included all of
My
them.
editor was not having it. But when Langston Hughes got paddled at Lincoln, I wanted to talk about him getting paddled at Lincoln, and they beat him, right? Because he had just came out with his book. I'm going to tell you now, but he had just come out with his book. He was a published author, a poet, and he went to Lincoln after that because he got depressed. Went to Lincoln to undergrad, and he pledged Omega Psi Phi, and they all right. And they said, oh, so you're a published author, so you're a poet, huh? So I know they're not going to beat you. So I'll beat you. And every brother said that. So he just got beat on beat on beat on beat. And then they did really strange things at Lincoln, like they dismantled the church organ and moved it into a dorm room as a prank. Like they just did these crazy things. So you stumbled upon all of these strange, interesting facts during this research process. And like I said, I wanted to include them all, but I couldn't. And so that it was a lengthy process, but it was also really fun. Kind of like just going through this history and finding so many parallels between what they experienced. That was fun, but also disheartening, right? The parallels between what they experienced back then and what we're still experiencing right now. But overall, it was quite enjoyable. And one last note, I did get one anecdote in, and that's the Chadwick Boseman one. He gave a speech at Howard during the commit. He gave an anecdote during his commencement speech that details the time he met Muhammad Ali walking on Howard's campus, and that is in here in its full text. So that's there that you can actually read.
Yeah, I love reading. I love that, yeah, like a lot of these kind of anthologies of various famous people, or well-known figures are just kind of straight biographies, but this is centered on their HBCU experience. And not to like harp on Langston Hughes too much, but when I read that section, I was like, what was going on? He was a college kid, an old college kid in the end, because it took him a while to get his shit together. So I thought, and it's so amazing to think of these, like, these are just our the great thinkers and creators and movers and shakers of American history, to think of them as college
Yeah,
kids
and if
at
I
some
may
point.
interject really briefly, because to stay on Langston Hughes and Thurgood Marshall went to school together at Lincoln University. Langston was like his senior. He was probably a senior when Thurgood was a junior. I mean, it was a freshman, I believe. But both of them, it's so strange to me. Both of them got kicked out of Lincoln. They got expelled for hazing people, and then they talk. I mean, it's Langston and Thurgood, so they talked their way back into Lincoln. But for a brief period in time, they were expelled from college for foolishness. And you wouldn't think that those two people would have that type of experience.
But you also might think that they would.
Thurgood, yeah, I probably.
Yeah, and speaking of that, I was going to ask about, there are actually a number of little Easter eggs throughout the book. So this book can be read in a number of ways, which I think is wonderful. If you're looking at the table of contents and you have, you're like, I love John Lewis, I want to read about John Lewis, you can just, flip to John Lewis. But if you read it from beginning to end,
As it's supposed to be read.
As books are supposed to be read, you hear the author. You really there's a lot of continuity, and you really see a history. And I love that, like, Kamala, when she was being sworn in, she used Thurgood Marshall's Bible, and Thurgood is in this book. So you see how excellence kind of supports excellence, and it's generational, and that's something that gets passed on. And I was reading the Bayard Rustin section, and his family used to host Mary McLeod and
W.B. Du Bois.
Yes. So, and then there are a few of those throughout, where you see these figures interacting with each other, if not directly, like going to school together or something, or having each other in each other's homes, or Zora, and doing the literary magazine Fire. Who did she work on that with? It was
with Langston Hughes.
With Langston
Yep.
Hughes, yeah.
Yep.
So, you really a story of not just one person, but this collective of people throughout the generations. You start to see that if you kind of read the book from beginning to end. You see that continuity, and were you thinking about that when you were doing your research? Was it something that you wanted to show in the book?
No, that was not intentional at all. That was all by happenstance, and and I think it is a true testament, as you say, to like the generational like approach to this or effect of this, but also the power, if I may plug the book, of HBCUs. And one other little egg that really struck me, because I did not know this, was that Martin Luther King, Morehouse grad, is in the book, but also W.E.B. Du Bois. And one thing I did not know was that W.E.B. Du Bois died the day before the March on Washington. And at the March on Washington, they stopped and had a moment of silence for W.E.B. Du Bois, who was in his, I forget, I should know this, but he was in his 80s, I believe, or 90 when he passed, right? 90, we got somebody? 90s when he passed, and they stopped and had a moment of silence at the March on Washington, which we know was the place King gave his I Have a Dream speech. And so there's that continuity there. And the march that Bayard Rustin helped organize, right, who's also in the book. So there's most definitely, that continuity.
Yeah, these figures kind of like circle each other, and I don't know, I thought that was so special. And I wanted to ask also, what was the research? It sounds like it was difficult, but I was trolling Alonzo a little bit, but it is all part of the process. Like that research, that like bloated first draft needed to happen. It's what got us, we needed all of those pieces so that we could shave away and find the story. So you did a great job. What was the most challenging part of writing this book?
Honestly, I wonder what you would say about this. It was okay. This is getting pretty technical with writing, but it was the voice. Like there is a voice that you should have, or there is a voice that permeates all written texts. And sometimes you can notice it, sometimes you can't. It sounds like an old white person most of the time. Sometimes it sounds like a young black woman, right? And their voice is always really particular. And when you get it down right, the reader can't even really process it, like or notice it. The reader shouldn't really notice it, but it should be felt, and it should feel organic. Like, oh, I just sat down at the coffee table with this woman, and she just won't stop talking. But it's really interesting. Getting the voice down was the hardest part. That first draft was very scholarly.
It was
It was really
very
scholarly.
scholarly. It was like, I was like, Alonzo, this is not going to be peer reviewed. You need to talk to the people. Like,
Yes. And then the second draft was the reverse. It was really voicey, really voicey, really funny and tongue in cheek. The last one, it was getting the voice down that was the hardest part for me. It wasn't really the research. The research was fine. But and I will also say some of the later people, the later icons was a challenge because, as I mentioned earlier, there are no books on them. Like, there are no books on Megan Thee Stallion and J.R. Smith. You have to really dig in order to find some information on them that's robust enough to cover a profile. And so that was difficult. That was challenging. But yeah, the voice was the most challenging bit.
yeah, we went back and forth like a couple times, but then when you nailed it, you really nailed it. I was like, go. Write the whole book now. Write the second draft. Was there anything about writing the book that surprised you? Another way you can think about that is like that that you feel like you'll take away from this process.
Oh, this is another really like writerly response, but it really was that drafting process. A lot of people say all the time that writing is rewriting, and people don't really understand that. I think a lot of writers don't understand that, but this whole process taught me that in order to really write well, you have to write the full thing out, trash it, and start over again. And that is very hard. It's also very humbling because you just told yourself that this was all trash. And it really was.
I mean, you really did write a
And you had
whole
to
other
read,
draft.
you had to, I had, you told me to. You acting like this was voluntary. So there was that humbling process that I learned must occur. Yeah. I think it must occur in order for you to get something that is that can last. Yeah. And I think this can last.
Yeah. Well, after you wrote that next draft, it was based. I mean, I remember things moving very quickly after that. We had to nail down the voice. We had to trim. But then once you submitted that draft, it was pretty quick. We still did maybe one big overhaul edit. And I remember at one point, I think it was maybe it was in the agitator section. Alonzo was like going through my edits, adding in his comments, and he just wrote, I think it was maybe in like, I don't know, Bob Hayes's entry or something, and it was like, Ada, are you still with me? Because we've gone through this a lot of times, and we're still going through this.
I mean, I must say as well that I am also an editor. Like, I think that my heart is with editing, and so that comment when I asked her if she was still with me was because I send them people back so many edits. They send me edits, and I send them edits, and my comments would be like 50, 60 comments in a manuscript. And so I know it was pretty tiresome for you as well. But yeah, it was a collaborative effort.
It really was. No, it was such a joy to work on this book with you. And I wanted to turn we're gonna do a Q&A very soon. I'm just gonna ask like a couple more questions, and then we'll turn it to the audience. So start thinking of your questions. But so there are some beautiful portraits in the book. If you don't have the book already, there are some gorgeous portraits by Gordon Rowe, and he did such an amazing job putting his own point of view on this too. And it just, I feel like you and him were like telepathically connected or something. I mean, the illustrations came in. It doesn't always happen this way, but the illustrations came in, and we were just like, it's amazing. Yes. We didn't have very many notes.
They're gorgeous, and I just want to plug that he's a Black Canadian artist, which is I find so so nice.
It is so nice. He kind of, can I tell this story? I'm going to tell this story. He kind of at the beginning of the project he asked if you could include Spike Lee, because he was like, I've always wanted to do a portrait of Spike, and you were like, it was because we had too much representation of.
No, we can never have too much in Morehouse.
Oh, my fault. You was gonna say something else?
No, I was gonna say Morehouse. We had a lot of
We can never
Morehouse.
have that. I mean, we only have 2 people from Morehouse. We do have other parts that mention Morehouse, I must say. But yeah, Spike Lee would have fell in. You want me to tell them why? Spike Lee
Yes.
would have fallen into the agitator section, I believe.
Oh yeah.
I believe he would have fallen into the agitator section, and I was like, listen here, don't record this. But I was like, listen here. I mean, you got Spike Lee. Who am I supposed to take out? Martin Luther King, Oprah Winfrey, John Lewis. Like, it was a really tight space.
Yeah. Choosing the people, we had to make these tough decisions because, of course, we want to include Spike, but. We had to, and we the other thing we thought about a lot was we wanted each section to be. I mean the lineup is, but there were a lot of people that we unfortunately were not able to include. Though there is that back section, additional icons, which has many more icons who attended HBCUs. But one of the things that was important to Alonzo and to me, and we felt that was important for the book, was to have like a diversity of fields that people were working in. So, of course, we wanted the artists, the thought leaders, the scholars, the mathematicians, the STEM people. So all of these made it hard to choose each person. Yeah,
they did, and we not only wanted it to be a diversity of like fields, but also of HBCUs, because if you went to a HBCU or if you didn't go to a HBCU, you know how competitive, it is. You know how, the rivalries and everything, and how many people feel, be it true or not, that there are only a handful of HBCUs that get the limelight, that get the credit. And so I wanted to make sure that, and I asked Ada to hold me accountable and making sure that who we have here is like really reflective of all the HBCUs. And I must say that we have present here tonight. I'm going to do another little plug. The librarian at Thurgood Marshall Academy. And what I want to mention is that the Library Journal gave a review. And the Library Journal gave a review of Historically Black. And in that review, it mentioned how diverse and well balanced the HBCU experience was reflected in this book. And so I was very happy to know that what our efforts were actually achieved, that people feel who are outside of the HBCU experience, that when they're coming to it, it is a well balanced portrait of all 100 and something schools, because it's 100 and something.
Yeah. And the review also mentioned that this would be a great companion to Beyonce's Coachella performance, Homecoming, which I was like, I don't think I've ever seen Beyonce's Coachella performance mentioned in a school library review before,
Right.
So that was pretty cool. So I'm going to do a really quick rapid round of questions, and then we're going to turn it over to the Q&A. So which profile was the hardest to write?
I'm sorry, I'm slow.
Rapid.
I know.
No.
The first thing that comes to mind is Bayard, though. Bayard Rustin.
Well, I don't know why I knew you were going to say that.
I don't know either. I must give another plug. Bayard Rustin is not the only, but one of the few LGBTQ icons in this book. So he was a gay activist during the time. And I'm slowing down your rapid speed, but it was hard for him because he was one of King's most trusted advisors. He was the person when he came back from India who told King to put down his gun. King used to walk around with a revolver. Many people don't know that. And he was talking about nonviolence. And Bayard Rustin said, "You have to let it go." He was the person who convinced him of that. And he was the person who organized the March on Washington. But he was also gay, openly gay. And the establishment pushed him to the side. So I think that just like making sure his story was accurately captured was very important to me. And so it was pretty hard to write. But I will say that Gordon Rowe's portrait of him is
gorgeous.
Stunning.
That was one of our favorites. Thank you for that. I think Bayard's his quote in the book is my favorite. The only way to reduce ugliness in the world is to reduce it in yourself. Which profile was like just flowed out of you?
Morrison.
Do you want to talk about Toni Morrison?
I can recite it now.
He wrote that from his brain.
Right.
No research.
No sources. I am the source. But yeah,
It's all
Morrison.
downloaded into Alonzo. I knew you were going to say that. What's something you'd say to someone who's considering applying to an HBCU?
I mean, do it. Like, much of it is already recounted in here, but you are, like I said earlier, not tolerated. You are wanted. I will also mention though, if we're shoulder to shoulder or we're at the table or something like that, that what I didn't know before going to an HBCU, although I lived in a predominantly Black town, was how diverse Black people are. And so I would say to them that if you're looking for diversity, you will find it there, because you're getting Caribbean people from the continent. When I say the continent, we're talking many, many different countries in Africa. You're getting rich Black people, you're getting poor Black people, you're getting middle class Black people. The diversity is there, and it will expand your definition. I think that was the best thing for me. It expanded my definition of Blackness, and it made me feel like it was okay to be me. And that's how you gotta feel. You don't need to be fighting yourself at nobody's school.
Yes, it's true, among other things. I know a lot of your HBCU family is here today. Is there anything you want to say to your HBCU family here, or just at large in general?
If you can join me, Morehouse. Y'all don't leave me hanging. Thank you for showing the sign. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. And did you want to close us out with a little reading? Let's do the reading, and then let's do the questions.
I'm not shouting out my Morehouse brothers ever again. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go to 137. This a graduate from a PWI said we should always be ready.
Exactly.
So y'all need to get ready
and be on time.
and
I'm going to page 137.
homecoming. I know a lot of us have feelings about homecoming. These are my feelings. Bacchanal, revelry, carnival, debauchery. These words spring to the front of our minds when thinking of homecoming. But there are other words that keep alumni returning. Words like reverence, pride, rest, peace. Homecoming, for alumni in particular, is a bit of respite in this world of madness. It shores us up and fuels our tanks as we prepare to disperse yet again to the far corners of this nation, this world. For too brief a weekend, we go home to re-inhabit the lives we lived while students. We retell old stories, flesh out stale jokes, circle back to debates first started years ago. We remember who we once were. These are no doubt the ruminations of an old man, but the experience is not all that different as a student. Perhaps the best part of homecoming is simply being in the number, pressing your way through that mass of people who were and are just like you. The smell of catfish sizzling in the grease, the pungent scent of weed, solo cups raised shoulder high to keep the liquor inside, music thumping so loudly the canopy of tents trembles. I remember my first homecoming. I witnessed, under one of those tents, a group of old men greet each other with hugs so tightly their muscles bulged. A woman stumbled upon a friend she hadn't seen in years and playfully shoved her. The friend turned and they fell into each other, crying. At homecoming, There's love above the hot pavement, and your chest is thick with it. Drunk off Everclear, I accidentally stepped on a man's sneakers. All he said was, "Don't worry, fam. We home, ain't it?"
Let's give a round of applause to Alonzo. Now, does anyone in the audience have any questions for our author?
Oh, yes, Mr. Mill.
Mr. Mel has the floor. You know I got those teacher eyes, so if your hand goes up, I see you. Tyrone.
Some of the aspiring writers out here, what would you say would be the most significant discipline you would have to have when you're trying to write a book?
Writing every day, whether you like it or not. It's discipline that I don't adhere to myself. It's advice that I don't follow myself. But when I do follow it, it works. Write every day. Yeah.
And have a flip phone.
Okay, so I also have a flip phone. I have a burner phone that because sometimes
Javante's shaking her head.
sometimes I have to go underground in order to get Ada her pages. It's Ada's fault.
Okay.
If she needs the pages, I have to go underground to get the pages, and so I turn off my phone. But yes, have a flip phone that works.
Miss Cole.
Miss Coco. Hey.
So, what would you say to ladies that want to get their story out there that don't have? How can they start?
I think that they should start by writing if they want to write it. They should start by writing the story and let that be the goal, the end goal. And once it's actually done, then they should start seeking out the mediums or the platforms to share their story or the people that can help them share their story. But I think the first goal should be completing it. If you want to get it out there for yourself, is what I'll tell them. Finish it so that you can read it and then share it with somebody else. But I think that if you have the goal of just getting your story out there, then you won't really do the work. And it's a lot of work that is necessary to finish it. So you wind up finding somebody, contacting somebody, and then they ask you for your work and you don't have it. Finish it.
I have a question for you. Where was your passion for writing ignited? Like, where did it all start for you?
I honestly don't have an answer. I've always wanted to write. I've always wanted to publish a book, write a book, and then in time that turned into editing a book. I've always loved reading. My family definitely knows that. My sister's rolling her eyes. I kept books around me, and it was really interesting because I'm from a really small town, and so I didn't really know a lot growing up. And so I knew that I wanted to write, and what I actually did, it's a really embarrassing story, but it's true. I actually started by I said, I want to write a book. And this is my favorite book. It was a book of fairy tales. And I said, so to write it, I guess I'm supposed to just copy it. So I copied it word for word in my own little journal, right? Because I just didn't know. I didn't have a concept of what writing meant. But I've always been trying to write something, and I don't know where that comes from. I don't know where my sister might know where it comes. Gotta ask her. Oh, she don't know either. But yeah, I'll circle back. Yeah, no, it's some intrinsic thing, and it's a passion that I found, and I'm really happy I found it. Really happy I found it because there are people search for their purpose in life, and I landed on mine really early, and I'm so grateful for that. But I don't know where it came from. KT.
How much time it took?
Yeah. We were just talking about
We
this
were talking
question
about this.
actually. I say it took a year because it's kind of country. For this one, I'm working on other projects that have taken longer. But for this one, it took a year. Ada pitched it to me earlier, She pitched it to me earlier than a year, like a year and a half before like it was finished. But when I decided to actually start, it took a year. Yeah, and there was a lot of reading. Casimir.
You spoke about your experience at FAMU and how that had an impact. Is there any particular moment when you were at Morehouse that influenced this work of art?
I mean, definitely Homecoming. That definitely influenced it. There is a section, a sidebar in this piece, in this book called Choral Ensembles. And in there, I talk about the Morehouse College Glee Club. And that entire experience, which was like 2 years of my life, freshman and sophomore year, deeply influenced the entire project, because to be in the Glee Club is to be more than a singer. It is to be in community with an amazing body of brothers, of men who you travel with and everything. So that definitely contextualized and colored my experience at Morehouse. And then outside of that, the professors, because the professors are hard. They're hard. And so that kind of helped me understand the experiences that some of the other people went through. Some of the other icons when they talk about being in college. So that was helpful. I would say the professors, the club, yeah, were definitely influences.
Topher.
Hey. So you're a fiction writer and pivoting to do nonfiction and research. Is there anything you learned that might impact your fiction writing?
Yeah, that so little research goes into the final draft. A lot of people say that too, and I found that to be true. And the final, I mean, Ada told me to take out the research, right? Because it would help me better, like, centralize and focus on the narrative. So, and that is transferring over into the novel that I'm working on. So little research goes into the final product. You just have to kind of know it and then communicate it in a way that is organic to and lives within the piece that you're writing. But you're not supposed to just rewrite the research. That really helped, and I think I'll carry that with me for a while. Mm-hmm. How many more questions we got? Sanjay. I'm not calling on you. Sanjay.
Hi, Alonzo. One of the things you said earlier was about finding your voice and using your voice. For especially students, you know, what I do with the students with my work, how would you encourage them to go about finding their voice, even if it isn't just a short burst of writing versus creating a book? So what's your mechanism for finding your voice?
I would say first thing that comes to mind is have fun. Have fun. Because when you have fun, your voice comes out. It just comes out. When you intentionally sit down to have fun, if you sit down to write this essay for your teacher or for college or what have you, and you're in a different headspace, you're not in a this is a fun headspace, you're in a this I must accomplish this headspace, I must fulfill this. Your voice is going to be like stimulated. It's going to be blocked. But if you tell them just have fun, and if you make me laugh when I'm reading it, you got your 100 right there. If you make me laugh, because that is going to come out, and where the joy resides is where your voice resides, I think.
I just want to add on to that, because I'm remembering, I think when we were working on the voice, all I really said to you was, I just want it to sound like you. I want the book to sound like you sound. So we just had to bring that out. Are there any other questions?
Javante had a question.
No, my question is really simple. What's next for Alonzo?
What can you tell us about the novel, Alonzo?
I am working on a novel right now. And it's a novel and it's a work in progress. It's a work in progress. And I guess that's all I can say. But yeah, what's next for Alonzo? Fiction. I have a novel project that I'm working on. I think it's going to be done fairly soon. You know, knock on wood. I don't see any wood around, but I think it's going to be fairly. We're knocking on Africa. Y'all can't see this, but this is Africa. I think it's going to be done fairly soon, and yeah, I've been in education for 10 years. I don't see that stopping anytime soon. I love to teach, so you will still see me teaching, and I will always write, whether this novel is done in a couple months or not, because can't stop.
And would you do nonfiction again?
What I do nonfiction, I actually want to do another nonfiction project, and it would be interesting to a lot of people here because I want to do a nonfiction project. I don't know if I should say the title, but the title would be Forever Glades. My father was a photographer, and I have thousands of photographs of just Black life in Belgrade, Florida, and I want to capture that in a project. And that is a lot of time. But I will hopefully get to it. Yeah.
I think we have time for like a couple more questions and then we're gonna do a signing. Yeah, go ahead.
Tiffany Campbell.
What person you wish to read this book?
Girl, don't start. That's my sister, y'all. She wanna make me cry. So as I mentioned in the intro, my mom passed away when I was in high school. And my dad passed away shortly after I graduated from Morehouse. So two people. And I'll stop there.
Do we have one more question? I think in the back.
Miss Thompson.
Good evening. What is an experience that you had that made you recognize that words and language have power?
That words and language have power. See, she got me clean. That words and language have power. Leave it to her with the hard question. That words and language have power. Man, I would say church. You know, I grew up AME, and I went to church. I was a church boy, really. And there I learned from Reverend I.S. Jones that I'm gonna fight you, Tiffany. I learned that you could do so many things with language. You could read a passage, and that's why I love reading. You could read a passage and kind of flip it upside down or interpret it in ways that other people did not think. And as a result, change another person's perspective, change another person's viewpoint on life. And I found that extremely powerful, and I learned that in the pew. Mm-hmm.
Ahmad, did you have your hand up or nope? Okay. All right. Well, thank you everyone for being here. Alonzo's going to sign books, which is really exciting. So you're going to have a chance to talk to him if you didn't get to ask him a question. Buy Historically Black. Buy it now. Buy it here at Syncopa. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. I really, really appreciate it. And there's an after party. Everybody's invited. If you don't got the deets, see me.
Hey, Lonzo.
Yeah, it's Coco. Y'all need to meet Coco too before the night over with. Coco. Thank you so much for coming. Not in that.
Thank you, everyone. If you can form a line here on your right, my left, if you are trying to get your book signed. If you're trying to have your book signed, please line up to the right. Please line up to the right. To the right. Right at the front. I can bring some of your name out.
Is this the style?
Oh, sure.
How you doing? I'm about to come out there, you know. I will see you. No.